The saw-scaled vipers usually eat Indian red scorpions, tiny baby wolf snake. I saw thousands of flamingos that they don't have teeth. They are mammals that have venom. They lay eggs, although they're mammals. When they dive underwater, they do a really weird hunting thing where they just shut their eyes while hunting. The crawfish, when they move around, their movements in the water release electric pulses. Greenland shark that is probably alive now maybe could have been born in the 1500s, and they scavenge on polar bears. What it does is it actually creates a bubble around itself of air, dives underwater, and the water's not touching it because it has an air bubble around it, and it hunts its prey and it comes back out and it eats it. These kites only eat apple snails, unique and special ability where they can basically dive a little bit, burrow themselves into the mud, release a lot of thick mucus around them that actually becomes like a parchment, like cocoon for them, where they can survive the dry season until water comes back. Actually, one of the few animals that have lungs and gills both. At the end of their tail, they actually have this sharp, tiny edge that looks like the prey actually moves the end of its tail. I actually saw the tiger that was stalking and trying to hunt the Indian gaur. It was snorkeling in the Bahamas, and there was a really beautiful stingray. They're one of the most rare and elusive big cats in the world. Hi guys, welcome to my second wildlife podcast. I literally love making last time's podcast because I love talking about wildlife and nature, and I've decided that every Wednesday I'm going to be uploading a new wildlife podcast. So since it's Wednesday, I'm just gonna talk about wildlife and nature with you guys, and I decided why not start off the podcast by telling you guys what I did this week related to wildlife and nature. So a couple of days ago, I actually went for a trail, and that was one of the most beautiful trails that I've been to in a really long time. I went with the naturalists that I've gone for so many trails with before, and when we started the trail, we literally saw a really beautiful Indian red scorpion on the wall on the left of the trail, really far away. But it was such a beautiful scorpion, and I've seen Indian red scorpions so many times before, and they're always so fascinating to see. And we saw two more Indian red scorpions on the trail as well. And in case you guys didn't know, basically female Indian red scorpions, once they give birth to the tiny baby scorpions, they actually carry them on their back, and that is a sight that I've never seen. And I've watched it in documentaries and in YouTube videos, and it's such a fascinating thing that the Indian red scorpion females actually carry the baby scorpions on their back, and it's really what a beautiful sight. And after seeing those three Indian red scorpions, we during the trail we saw them at different intervals. Like we saw the first Indian red scorpion like half an hour after walking in the trail, and then after like another half an hour we saw the second Indian red scorpion, and they're really beautiful, you guys. I absolutely love Indian red scorpions. And another thing, in case you guys didn't know, is that saw-scaled vipers, the one of the most highly venomous snakes in the entire world, basically their primary food source is scorpions, and both of them share a similar habitat, like arid, semi-arid regions, and with rocky terrain and stuff. So the saw-scaled vipers usually eat Indian red scorpions, and because we had seen three Indian red scorpions, I was really hoping that we would see a saw-scaled viper as well on the trail, but we didn't see a saw-scaled viper. And we saw a lot of other snakes as well. But so we saw a really beautiful green vine snake, and green vine snakes are semi-venomous snakes that are completely arboreal. They eat geckos, they eat skinks, they eat tiny lizards, and they have the vertical eye pupil. They're really beautiful snakes, and again, as I mentioned, they're diurnal, and they're one of the most fascinating snakes that I've seen. We saw it perched high up in the tree, up above, and that was really beautiful. We also saw another green vine snake on the way down from the trail, towards the end of the trail, and that was a much smaller green vine snake, but it was so beautiful that we got to see two green vine snakes during the same 4-5 hour trail. And we also saw two Indian chameleons, and Indian chameleons are absolutely beautiful creatures. They're arboreal again, and most of the times that I've seen them in the past, I've seen them perched high up on a tree, like really high up on the tree as well. And mostly during mountain trails I've seen them, and they're absolutely beautiful creatures, you guys. Again, they're diurnal like the green vine snakes, and they're absolutely beautiful creatures. Another really fascinating sight that I saw during the trail that I had never seen before was a really huge wolf spider that was trying to hunt a beetle, and it was really far away, but I saw it from the zoom in my phone, and it was really weird the way it was trying to hunt, because it was such a fascinating wolf spider, and the beetle was still alive, and it was trying to eat it, and it was trying to kill it before it can eat it, and it was one of the most weird, it was one of the most fascinating sightings I've ever seen in the jungle. And it was super weird because I'd never seen a spider kill a beetle like that before. It was very weird. And yeah, it was super fascinating. And apart from that, I also saw a couple of centipedes. We saw a few birds as well. And yeah, the highlight of the entire trail that I absolutely was my one of my best sightings of my life of a snake. We saw a really, oh wait, before I talk about the best sightings, I also want to tell you guys the second species that we saw. We also saw a really beautiful bronzeback tree snake perched high up above in the tree canopy. And bronzeback tree snakes are arboreal snakes, they're diurnal snakes. They eat small mammals and geckos. Sorry, they eat mostly like geckos, I think, on the trees. I'm not too sure. But I've seen bronzeback a couple of times, and those special sighting that I was going to tell you guys that I saw that I've never seen before. We saw a really, really beautiful, tiny baby wolf snake. And I've said this story before in one of my videos that I have gone for literally hundreds and hundreds of trails, hundreds and hundreds of safaris in my life. But even after seeing so many rare snakes in the wild, like the Gunther's Racer Sayadri vine snake, and so many other snakes that are relatively rarer than the common snakes that are seen commonly. The common wolf snake was a snake that I actually hadn't seen till a couple of months back, and it was super fascinating to me how I've seen so many rare snakes in the wild, but the common wolf snake is a snake that, even after going for so many trails and safaris, is a snake that I somehow have not seen yet in the wild. And actually, a few months back, when I went for a trail, um, um, we saw a wolf snake, a really, really beautiful wolf snake for the first time. I saw a wolf snake during the trail, and this time, a few days ago, when I saw the tiny baby wolf snake, it was one of the most fascinating sightings I've ever seen, because it was the second time I'd ever seen a wolf snake in the wild, and it was such a tiny, tiny baby wolf snake, you guys. It was so beautiful. It was on the side of the trail in the leaf litter and then crossing the rocks. It was one of the most beautiful sightings ever, and it was really, really beautiful. After that, I started slithering on the steps on the left, and it was one of the most beautiful snakes ever. Like, literally, one of the most beautiful snakes I've ever seen. And what an incredible sighting! What an amazing way to end the trail by seeing a really, really beautiful wolf snake. That's also such a tiny wolf snake in the litter. And you know what I thought about after seeing these tiny snakes, you guys, is that especially for a tiny wolf snake, in the reptile world, there's no maternal care in most of the species. So if the wolf snake gives birth to a tiny wolf snake, that tiny wolf snake, when it's a baby, is on its own. It has to hunt on its own since it's born. And that is super fascinating, because just seeing that tiny wolf snake survive in the wild, like, that was so fascinating, because there's so many animals that would probably eat it when it's that small. That tiny wolf snake was maybe 5 inches or 4 inches. It was that small. So at that size, there are a lot of other snakes that are snake eaters. Like, the common kraits are primary snake eaters. They mostly eat snakes. So that would be like such a tiny and easy prey for the common krait if the common krait came across it in the wild. So it's just super fascinating when non-venomous snakes like the wolf snake are so resilient, and they live in the same habitats as such venomous snakes like the common krait that would probably prey on them, but they still manage to survive, most of them. And some of them do get eaten by kraits and other animals, but most of the wolf snakes do survive. And it's so fascinating how snakes are so beautiful, you guys, and they're so fascinating, and I just love snakes. So that was all the animals we saw during that trail. And what was super fascinating is, so the trail was actually few hours away from where I live. So when I was on my way there, the trail hasn't even begun. I'm like a few hours away from the meeting point of where the trail starts, and I saw thousands of flamingos, you guys. I literally saw thousands of beautiful flamingos. There were greater flamingos and lesser flamingos, all flying really high up above in the sky. And I zoomed from my phone and I saw they were absolutely beautiful. And even on the mud flats on the left, there were a lot of flamingos. There were thousands of flamingos, and I saw them all from my car when I was on the way to the trail. And I absolutely love flamingos. So flamingos actually migrate to Mumbai each year. The greater flamingos and lesser flamingos migrate. The greater flamingos actually come from parts of Africa, and the lesser flamingos come from Gujarat, and they're absolutely beautiful. Both these species are really, really beautiful birds, and they are absolutely beautiful, and they come in thousands and thousands of birds. And they basically are pink in color, the lesser flamingos, and the greater flamingos are little lesser pink, and they both eat shrimp and other diet that actually gives them the pink color due to a pigment I think called carotenoids. I'm not sure, and it's super fascinating. And I absolutely love flamingos. So it was so nice that even a few hours before I've reached the trail, I saw thousands of flamingos, and that wasn't it. When I was on the way to the trail, I also saw a really beautiful langur perched on a tree on the left, and then I was like, oh my god, this is literally so fascinating. I've already seen thousands of flamingos and a langur before I've even started the trail, and then I saw a really beautiful dove flying in the sky. And after the dove, I also saw when there was traffic in one of the on one of the roads to reach the trail. On the left, there was a tiny wall, and because there was traffic, I was peering out of the window, and I saw an Oriental garden lizard sitting on the wall, really far away as well. So I was like, wow, I've already seen four really beautiful animals before I've even started the trail. And then, you guys, when I was like 15 minutes away from the trail, I even saw a really beautiful Brahmini kite. And that is so fascinating because I've seen Brahmini kites only twice in my life before. And both the times were, one was when I had gone for a boat ride, and one was near the mangroves. But it was so fascinating to see the Brahmini kite as well. And this all of these five animals were before I had even started the trail. So I literally love going for trails. I love being out in nature, and there's so many birds and animals everywhere. If you just look out, you will always see the beautiful birds and animals that are there everywhere in this world. And I literally had so much fun in this trail. And yeah, now that I told you guys about the trail, let me oh wait, I actually went for another trail as well that I want to talk about. So actually, a few days ago, about 4 5 days ago, I went for a trail. It was a really short trail. It was about 30 45 minutes that I walked for. And I saw a couple of birds. I saw a few coppersmith barbets, and I really find them so fascinating. And which other birds did I see? I saw the golden oriole. And if you guys don't know, basically, golden orioles are really beautiful birds. They eat fruits, and they're mostly frugivorous birds. They eat figs and other fruits like that. And I saw a couple of golden orioles. I saw a few black caped orioles. I don't know. I think that's what they're called. And what was so fascinating about that trail was I saw three Indian rat snakes. And one Indian rat snake that I saw was slithering in the leaf litter really far away from the trail. And two of the rat snakes that I saw, which was so fascinating, I saw them quite close to one another. And that was so fascinating for me because when I was walking on the trail, I looked to the left and I saw two heads popping out of the rocks, and both had their tongues out and they were like trying to sniff, and they were really far. And one was super, it was a very thick Indian rat snake, and the other one was like very tiny, very super tiny. And it was so fascinating that they were merely like 3 to 4 feet apart. And there were just two rat snakes so close to each other, so that was super fascinating. And yeah, those were the two trails that I went for this week. And now, like last time's podcast where I spoke about five fascinating animals, I'm going to talk about five fascinating animals again in today's video. And as I prefaced in last time's video, that there are literally millions and millions of fascinating animals, and animals that I find fascinating and want to talk about. And I have decided that last time how I picked five randomly to talk about, this time also I'm going to pick five animals randomly to talk about that I find fascinating. Okay, so let's start. So the first animal that I want to talk about that I find super fascinating is the platypus. Okay, and I find platypuses to be one of the most fascinating creatures on the planet, and I'm going to tell you guys the different reasons why. Okay, so platypuses are mammals that lay eggs. They're monotremes. And the only other mammals that lay eggs apart from the platypus in the entire world are echidnas, and there are actually 4 different subspecies of echidnas that lay eggs. So platypuses are already super fascinating because they're mammals that lay eggs, but apart from that, they also have fur, they have a duck-like beak, they have a beaver-like tail, and they have a bunch of other physiological and biological things that make them super fascinating. Another thing that I find super fascinating about platypuses is that the male platypuses have hollow spurs near their hind legs, which are connected to venom glands. So they also are mammals that have venom. So what? That's literally so fascinating, you guys. And even more than that, when they hunt, they have this really unique hunting method where they shut their eyes mostly when they hunt, and they rely completely on their beak. And what I mean by that is that their beak actually has 40 to 70,000 electric receptors. So basically, all the crawfish and all their prey in the water, when they move around, their movements in the water release electric pulses, and the platypus's beak is so sensitive and can sense these electric pulses and can literally track down its prey like the crawfish and eat it. So not only are they mammals that have venom, the male platypuses only have venom, not the females. Again, super fascinating. Not only do the male platypuses have venom, not only are they mammals that lay eggs, not only do they live in freshwater bodies and eat crayfish by finding them through the electric pulses that the crayfish send out by their movement. I just find platypuses so fascinating in every single way, and they they're literally one of the most fascinating creatures on the planet, and I can't wait to see one in the wild. I have never seen a platypus in the wild, and I literally find them super fascinating. Now, the second animal that I want to talk about that I find super, super fascinating are Greenland sharks. Oh my god, you guys, I have so much to talk about with Greenland sharks. So, when it comes to the ocean, there are literally a million creatures that I find fascinating even within the oceans. And the Greenland shark is definitely one that I find super fascinating because, basically, in case you guys don't know, Greenland sharks are the um, longest living vertebrates on the planet. And what I mean by that is that the average lifespan of the Greenland shark is 272 to 500 years approximately. Yes, you guys, that is literally how long they live. So a Greenland shark that is probably alive now maybe could have been born in the 1500s. That is how long they live, and they're even more than that, they're fascinating for a bunch of different reasons, but just their lifespan is so fascinating that how can any animal, let alone sharks that are so huge, they're not tiny creatures, they're super, super huge sharks, can live up to 500 years. That I find that super, super cool and super fascinating. And just to talk a little more about Greenland sharks with you guys, they live near the Arctic waters in the most absolute super cold temperatures, and they live at a variety of depths. They can live quite close to the surface of the water as well, and they can go really, really thousands of feet deep into the water and live really deep in the ocean. They're actually called sleeper sharks as well because they move so slowly in the ocean, literally at such a slow speed that gives them the name the sleeper sharks. And they basically are not picky eaters at all. Okay, so they actually hunt for eels, squid, and fish sometimes, but most of the times they actually scavenge. And I've read a couple of articles of um, uh, researchers that were studying Greenland sharks and actually found that Greenland sharks eat the in their scavenging. They've also eaten polar bears, reindeer, and seals. So they're super fascinating Greenland sharks. And what's even more fascinating about them, apart from the fact that they live so long, they live in such stormy, icy waters, and they can live in depths of uh, such great depths below the ocean, and they scavenge on polar bears. What's even more fascinating is that most of the times, because they live for hundreds and hundreds of years, there's a parasite that actually can attach to their eye and make them partially blind. But their sense of smell is so amazing in the ocean that they can actually find their prey and scavenge on the on whatever they want in the ocean. And they're really their sense of smell is so good that even the parasite makes them mostly blind, they can still live their lifespan and survive. So I find Greenland sharks super fascinating, and they're literally one of the most fascinating animals ever. So now the third animal that I'm going to talk about that I find super fascinating are definitely sloth bears. I think sloth bears are one of the most fascinating animals ever because there's so many bears, and a lot of the different bear species are good climbers. And sloth bears are one of the most fascinating animals. They eat ants and termites. They actually lack a few teeth in their mouth, the front teeth on top, so that it creates a sort of vacuum so they can suck the termites and ants out of the termite mounds and the ant hills, which is their primary food. And they're really good tree climbers, and they're really aggressive as well. There have been a lot of documentaries I've seen where sloth bears are super defensive against tigers, and the mother sloth bear will actually protect its young really aggressively against tigers. And sloth bears are super fascinating animals, and they're really beautiful animals, and they're really strong animals, and they have one of the sharpest claws ever. And that's how they can actually climb trees really well, because their claws are so sharp, and they're one of the most fascinating animals ever. And the fourth animal that I'm going to talk about that I find super fascinating um, are definitely, oh my god, I find so many animals fascinating. I think it's the jaguar, and I find jaguar super fascinating because where do I even begin? These are animals that literally hunt caimans and other reptilian species as their food source, and other capybaras, which are the world's largest rodents, and they're amazing predators, and they have actually been known to be at the edges of the Amazon and jump into the Amazon, which is full of anacondas, green anacondas, and piranhas and caimans and other reptilian species. And the jaguar is so fierce. They're literally super fascinating because they jump in, they eat the caimans, they eat the crocodiles, and they literally they drag them right out of the water and come back out on land. And they're super strong creatures and one of the most fascinating animals ever, and I absolutely love jaguars. I have seen jaguars a couple of times when I had gone for the River Quest safari in Singapore, but that is not in the wild. I've never seen a jaguar in the wild, and I would love to see a jaguar once in the wild. And yeah, so now the fifth animal that I find super fascinating that I'm going to be talking about. Um, okay, so definitely is the Florida Panther. Okay, so this I'm going to talk about in detail with you guys, okay? So mountain lions are found across a variety of habitats. They're actually found in the mountains, really high up in altitudes that have a lot of snow, and they're found in completely hot deserts, and they're found in the Amazon with a lot of um, canopy and thick vegetation, and they're found on mountains that are not with snow and just are like more forested mountains. So they're found across a lot of variety of habitat and a lot of different terrain. And the subspecies of the mountain lion that I'm going to talk about right now are the Florida Panthers, and I find these Florida Panthers to be super fascinating because, as I spoke about in my last video, the Everglades are one of the most fascinating places in the entire world, and the Everglades actually there's so much water in the Everglades at all time that these Florida Panthers have actually adapted over hundreds of years to be smaller than the rest of the mountain lions in the US and in Mexico. And basically, these Florida Panthers are relatively smaller, and the subspecies of mountain lion called the Florida Panther are known to eat hares and known to eat other animals. Okay, so now that I'm talking about Florida Panthers in the Everglades, I thought why not talk about the Everglades a little bit more. So I literally find the Everglades super fascinating, and one of the reasons is that they're the only place in the world where alligators and crocodiles are found together. Alligators basically prefer freshwater habitats, whereas crocodiles prefer brackish water habitats where saltwater and freshwater meet. But the Everglades is actually an exception where crocodiles and alligators live together in the same habitat. And I find American alligators super fascinating because they basically dig up with their snout and with their tails holes in the ground, and in case there's a drought or during the dry season in the Everglades, a lot of times what happens is fish and crabs actually get saved by going into these alligator holes where there's water, and they survive the dry season until the water returns. And alligators are super fascinating, and alligators actually have one of the most prevalent sexual dimorphism out of all the reptiles. Reptiles already have a lot of sexual dimorphism, which means that they have a lot of different physical traits between the male and female of the same species. But the American alligator in particular has such prevalent sexual dimorphism that the male American alligators can be about 15 to 18 feet long, whereas the female alligators can only be maybe about 4 to 5 feet. So they have a lot of difference in size, and the sexual dimorphism is quite prevalent in American alligators. And a lot of animals in the Everglades are super fascinating. So there's actually a fishing spider in the Everglades that actually it doesn't create webs and catch its prey that by mistake might go into its web like other spider species. The fishing spider actually waits on top of the surface of water, and in case a tiny prey of its like a tadpole or something or an insect is down under the water below, like a really tiny insect, then what it does is it actually creates a bubble around itself of air that can make, and then it dives underwater, and the water's not touching it because it has an air bubble around it, and it hunts its prey and it comes back out and it eats it. So I find fishing spiders super fascinating. And the Everglades also have an endemic species of bird called the Everglades snail kites. And I find these so fascinating because these kites only eat apple snails, and they have specialized beaks that can break these apple snails so they can eat the snails inside. And again, they're endemic to the Everglades, and I find them super super fascinating. And some other animals that I find fascinating in the Everglades. There's actually a really really beautiful animal called the greater siren, and they're one of the most fascinating creatures in the entire world. So the greater siren is actually a type of salamander. They're about 3 feet long, and during the dry season, they have a really unique and special ability where they can basically dive a little bit, burrow themselves into the mud, create an S shape, release a lot of thick mucus around them, that actually becomes like a parchment like cocoon for them, where they can survive the dry season until water comes back. And not only is that super fascinating, they're actually one of the few animals that have lungs and gills both. So they have gills to pull oxygen from the water when water is there, and when the water is not there, and then the cocoon, as I mentioned, they can actually breathe through their skin and through their lungs. So this is super fascinating, and they're absolutely fascinating creatures. The greater sirens are one of the most unique animals in the world, and they can actually stay up to 3 years without water when they're in the cocoon. And it's super super fascinating. And what's even more fascinating is that there's a particular species of snake that eats mostly greater siren, and it's called the mud snake. And these mud snakes basically are really fascinating because they, at the end of their tail, they actually have this sharp tiny edge that looks like the prey of the salamanders, like the greater siren. So what it does is it actually moves the end of its tail, so the salamander thinks that its prey is there, and the salamander comes out to eat its prey, and then the mud snake feasts on the slippery 3 foot salamander. And since their primary food source is super slippery and they're salamanders, they actually have specialized rear fangs that are very sharp to grip the thing, to grip their prey. And they're amazingly fascinating snakes, you guys. Mud snakes, and the way that they're specialist predators, and they only eat the greater sirens, which are such fascinating creatures. I literally love the Everglades, and I love talking about the Everglades. There's such amazing animals that live there. And which other animals? There's also the eastern indigo snake, and that is actually a primary snake eater. So it mostly eats other snakes. So that is another snake species that's found in the Everglades. And another thing that I find really fascinating about the Everglades is that a lot of times the wading birds actually, they know that the number one target for their eggs, the number one predators of the eggs, are actually the opossums and the raccoons. They're not the alligators and crocodiles, since the alligators and crocodiles can't climb trees, and the wading birds usually lay their eggs in nests on high up in the canopy of trees. But the raccoons and the opossums can actually climb the trees. So what the wading birds actually do is they will a lot of times pick an area where there are a lot of crocodiles and there are a lot of alligators in the Everglades, and there might be like a few trees in that patch with a lot of alligators surrounding. So they actually will choose that tree and will make a nest on top of that tree, so that the raccoons and opossums cannot actually climb the tree and raid their nests and eat their eggs, since that would put the raccoons and opossums in danger of the crocodiles if they were trying to cross the water and come to the tree to find the nest. And this is also beneficial for the alligator, since a lot of the times these different species of wading birds lay a lot of eggs, but they do not have the they cannot take care of all of these eggs. So a lot of different some species of birds actually, the mother bird will actually throw the one of the chicks out of the nest in case she feels it is weak or it may not survive, or in case she feels that there's not enough food to provide for all the eggs. So the alligators are also happy in this because they get a hatchling that the mother bird has thrown off from the nest into the water. So it is a sort of a it's beneficial for both the animals. The wading birds get to safeguard most of the eggs from the terrestrial predators, sorry, the arboreal predators like the raccoons and the opossums. And the alligators also, if in case the some birds are fall off the nest, or in case the mother bird decides that a chick is weak and throws it off the nest, and the alligator feeds on those birds as well. So this is another super fascinating thing about the Everglades. And the Everglades actually have a lot of seagrass that the manatees eat. There are a lot of manatees in the Everglades. They're super beautiful, beautiful marine animals, and there are a lot of crocodiles as well. And I remember I have gone to Orlando a lot of times, and when I was going to one of the theme parks in Orlando, I was in a bus, and from the bus, we had actually seen a couple of ponds, and there were a few manatees that I had seen, and I'd also seen a couple of crocodiles as well. So the Everglades are really, really fascinating. And in case you guys watched my last podcast, which I did last week, I told you guys about my experience where I saw the first snake ever in my life. And actually, when I was uploading a podcast clip of that podcast on my channel, I realized that wait, that wasn't the first time I saw a snake. The first time was when I saw a milk snake when I was I was standing in the line of a park. And basically, I'm going to tell you guys that the story. I already said it in the previous video, but when I was really, really young, I had gone to a theme park abroad, and I was standing in line, and the theme park was really close to the jungle, and there was a lot of nature on both sides of the theme park. And when I was standing in line for one of the rides, there was a wall, and the wall had a lot of some plants and a lot of rocks and everything, and I saw a really beautiful red snake on the wall. And I still remember I was really young, I was like really small, and I told my parents that is that snake supposed to be there because it wasn't it wasn't in an enclosure. It was literally like there were a lot of people standing in line, and it was right there. And I remember we asked the employee, and the employee, basically it was an animal theme park, so they knew who to call to take the animal to safety and everything. So that was really fascinating, and that was the first time I ever saw a snake in my life. And yeah, so the Everglades are definitely a place that I love and I would want to visit. They're super fascinating, and they're really, really. Every time I watch a documentary or I watch a YouTube video about the Everglades, I'm even more fascinated because I'm like, what a beautiful place, you guys! Like, what a really beautiful place. And now that I've spoken so much about the Everglades, I am going to tell you guys about three of my favorite wildlife sightings. Last episode, I told you guys about three of my favorite snake sightings, and now I'm going to be talking about three of my favorite wildlife sightings ever till now. So, my favorite wildlife sighting actually was my number one favorite wildlife sighting till now was actually when I had gone to Kanha National Park for a safari, and it was like my sixth safari there in the few days that I was there. And I love Kanha National Park. I've seen so many animals there, and it's one of the most beautiful places ever. And during that safari, when the safari began, I first saw a barking deer. And barking deer are basically solitary deer species. They're not they're not they don't live in herds like the chital deer. They're solitary deer species. So I saw a barking deer. I also saw the swamp deer. They have the hard-footed Barasinga in Kanha, and I saw hundreds of them. They were absolutely beautiful in the grassland areas of Kanha. And I also saw a nilgai. I saw a spotted owlet. And my favorite experience that I want to tell you guys about, my favorite wildlife sighting, was during that same safari when I saw there were about 4 to 5 Indian gores, and the naturalist told us that basically he could hear alarm calls from ahead that chital deer were making. So he thought that there might be a leopard or a tiger that may walk near these Indian gore. And then I saw the most fascinating thing ever. We actually saw the tiger that was stalking and trying to hunt the Indian gore, and that was one of the most fascinating sights I've ever seen because although the Indian gore was super huge, it looked definitely much bigger than the tiger. You could see that the Indian gore was had noticed that the tiger was so far away and was walking towards towards the Indian gore. And you could see that it was getting a bit agitated and it was walking away, and the tiger was trying to hunt it, and it did not manage to hunt it. But it was one of the most fascinating sightings I've ever seen of a tiger out in the wild, in the jungle, trying to hunt an Indian gore. That was definitely one of the most fascinating sightings I've ever seen. And the second most fascinating sighting I've ever seen was oh wow, yeah. So I had gone for a mountain trail about a year ago, and I remember woodpeckers are really, really shy birds. Okay, you guys, and I've seen a lot of woodpeckers before. during safaris and during trails. But this sighting was super special because actually it was a pair of rufous woodpeckers, and there was a pagoda anthill. So if you guys don't know what a pagoda anthill is, it's those it's I'm gonna insert a picture over here that I've taken of a pagoda anthill that I've seen. But basically pagoda anthills, I there was one on the tree, and there was a pair of woodpeckers that were actually pecking on the pagoda anthill to disturb the ants inside. So all the ants would crawl out, and they were then eating these ants. And it was so fascinating to see them do this feeding behavior, because they were there. I saw them for a few minutes, and they were literally so calm. They just kept pecking on the ant hill, and every time the ants got out, they kept feeding on the ants. And it was so fascinating to see a pair of woodpeckers feed in the wild like that. I had never ever seen one before, so that was definitely one of the most fascinating experiences. um my third most favorite wildlife sighting has to be, I was exploring the tide pools in Mumbai with a naturalist, and I remember we saw a moray eel. And I had never ever seen a moray eel in the wild. I've seen them in so many aquariums in the past, but to see a moray eel in the wild, in the tide pool swimming, was so fascinating. I absolutely love eels, and moray eels are eels that are found in the ocean. And another eel that I've really wanted to see, completely unrelated to this species, is the swamp eel. I've never seen a swamp eel, and they're found in freshwater habitats, completely different habitat, completely unrelated to the moray eel. But just talking about eels, I remember that this is another eel species that I've really wanted to see, the swamp eel, and hopefully one day I can see the swamp eel in the wild, because they're mostly found in marshy habitats with wetlands and everything. Oh wait, you guys, I forgot to mention a fact about the Everglades. I know we're not on the Everglades topic anymore. Where I was talking about that a while back, but the Everglades aren't a swamp. Basically, the Everglades is actually a river that's moving really slowly. So it moves so slow, so slowly, and it's not a swamp. It's just a river that's moving slowly, and I find the Everglades so fascinating. With all of the wildlife and all that it sustains, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And yeah, and I'm talking about my three favorite wildlife sightings. Those were my three favorite wildlife sightings, and the moray eel I generally find fascinating, and I find many other animals in the ocean fascinating. And I still remember one of my other favorite wildlife experiences was when I was snorkeling in the Bahamas, and there was a really beautiful stingray that I had seen. It was one of the most beautiful stingrays ever, and I'd seen a lot of tropical fish as well when I was snorkeling in the Bahamas. And I know I've already said four different things, four different wildlife experiences, but I'm going to tell you guys a fifth one as well. So when I was snorkeling in Mauritius, it was one of the most beautiful coral reef areas ever. There were so many coral reefs. I saw a couple of clownfish. I saw a lot of different other tropical fish that were so colorful, and I also saw one of these fish. I don't remember what it is, but it was like a really long fish like this. It wasn't an arowana or something. It was another arowana, I think, a freshwater fish. This one was uh, uh, it was in the ocean, so it was definitely a saltwater fish, and it was near the coral reefs. But it was such a beautiful long fish like this, and it wasn't an eel as well. So that was one of the most beautiful experiences snorkeling in Mauritius and in the Bahamas. And in the Bahamas, I had also seen, apart from the tropical fish and the stingrays, there was a really tiny sea turtle as well that I had seen while snorkeling. So these were definitely my favorite wildlife experiences. And there are a lot of different other places that I would love to go to in the future as well. As I mentioned in the last last podcast, there are literally so many places, and Bandhavgarh is definitely one of them. I would love to go to Bandhavgarh because as I mentioned, I've gone for so many trails with naturalists who've praised Bandhavgarh and told me so many different stories about Bandhavgarh and the animals that they've seen there, and how it's such a beautiful terrain and such beautiful habitats, and how you see such a variety of different animals, whether it's the sloth bear that you might come across, or the Indian leopard, or the tiger, or the various ungulates that live there, like the chital deer, sambar deer, and various other small mammals like the Indian hare. So uh, I genuinely would love to go to Bandhavgarh, and I would love to go to Javai. I think I said that on the last podcast as well, but Javai is definitely amazing because I absolutely love Indian leopards. There is some chance, although it's a little bit, of seeing hyenas since they're mostly nocturnal, so the chance of seeing them during a day safari is really less, but it's still a possibility. And I would love to see jackals as well, And Java is definitely a place that's on my bucket list that I would love to go to. And yeah, talking about Javayan leopards, I when I had gone to Painch, I think I mentioned it in the last podcast as well, that I saw a pair of leopards walking down the mountain. And the second time I saw a leopard during a safari was in Painch as well. Again, it was a couple of years later, but it was a lone leopard, and it was just crossing the safari path really really far away. It just like crossed the safari path. That was really really beautiful. And another place that I want to talk about that I would love to go to. Oh my god, there are literally so many. I would love to go to Ladakh to see the snow leopards in the wild. I know it's super super difficult to spot one out in the wild, and they're one of the most rare and elusive big cats in the world. But that would be a dream of mine to see a snow leopard in the wild. And not only that, to see a Palace's cat. They're one of the most beautiful wildcats in the world, and they live in super snowy, cold regions near Ladakh and in Ladakh. And they're one of the most beautiful wildcats. And there's also the Eurasian lynx that is found in Ladakh. So I would love to see a lynx in the wild. I have never ever seen a lynx in the wild. So definitely Ladakh would also be a place that I would love to go to in the future, because there's so many different animals that live there. The wildlife is very very different there. Even the bear, I think the Asiatic black bear is found there. So it's super fascinating in terms of the wildlife. And even with the herbivores like the markhor, the bharal, the goral, the takin, there's so many different herbivores that I have never seen in the wild. And I would love to go to Ladakh to see all these beautiful creatures out in the wild. And even with snow leopards, you guys, I find them so fascinating because they live in such high altitudes, and they eat markhor, they eat bharal, they eat goral, they eat others smaller mammals that they can find because they're opportunistic predators. And they're super fascinating because already it's such an undulating terrain, and in that, to for them to hunt a sheep or something that already is such a good climber in that specific terrain, like these are animals that are so beautifully adapted to these landscapes. And it would be amazing and a beautiful delight to see any of these creatures in the wild. For me, it would be a dream. So I definitely would love to go to Ladakh also one day. And yeah, now that I've spoken about Ladakh and all these uh, animals, I think that's pretty much it for my podcast. And yeah, I really really hope you guys like this podcast. It was amazing. I had so much fun filming this podcast. I love talking about wildlife and nature with you guys. I literally love talking about wildlife and nature with you guys. And I'll see you guys next Wednesday, where I'll come back and talk about wildlife and nature again with you guys. And I literally love talking about wildlife and nature. So I'll see you guys in the next podcast next Wednesday. So I hope you guys like this podcast. And if you guys like this podcast, then hit the like button below, comment down below if you guys liked it, and subscribe to my channel because I'm going to be uploading a podcast every Wednesday. And I'll see you guys on the next podcast. Bye. Stay safe and keep loving animals.